Good afternoon. Good afternoon. There's a few of you with us. Thank you all for coming downtown. I'm Andy Lowe, Executive Director of the Elios Foundation, and this is the first event that we've done here at the Santa Barbara Foundation. So thank you all for coming, and thank you to the Santa Barbara Foundation for hosting us. This is the first of our full series, so over the next 4 months we're going to be having one event a month, and we'll be sending around the itinerary as a follow-up to this event. The next event will be at the beginning of October, the beginning of November, the beginning of December. And the idea behind the series is to feature some of the entrepreneurs that we've been working with. Dream case scenarios, we've managed to take all of us to come out to be able to see some of the entrepreneurs that we're working with in country, but unfortunately that's not always feasible. So we're bringing the entrepreneurs to you and trying to bring some of their experiences to you. So the format for today is I'm going to give a brief overview of the Elios Foundation. There's a number of new faces. I apologise to the familiar faces if you've heard it before. We'll go through it relatively quickly, but give you an overview of who Elios is. And then we'll watch a brief video that we took from my recent trip. Jeremy will then talk about DDD, and then we'll have a chance for Q&A at the end. So we're going to be using the PowerPoint to go through it, and we're going to be filming the event just so we can have it, and then you can have it as a follow-up to be looking at as well. So we do have comment cards on your chair. One of the things that we're really keen to do is to be a learning community. One of the reasons that we're having the event here at the Santa Barbara Foundation is to see if that attracts different people, if that has a different feel. And so we welcome feedback. There's no such thing as a mistake unless we're not learning. So please be as honest and as direct as you feel comfortable, and then hopefully we can all be learning together. So who is the Elios Foundation? This is a very flashy setup that they have here at the Santa Barbara Foundation, so I'm slightly nervous with all the technology. We managed to start on the first slide. So the DNA of the Elios Foundation, we're focused on educate, empower, and engage. And the way that we do that is by investing in early stage entrepreneurs pioneering high impact market-based solutions that are eradicating extreme poverty. All of our focus is on opportunities in the developing world. We believe in the importance of market-based solutions, and we believe that social entrepreneurs are one of the keys to the eradication of extreme poverty, which we believe is feasible. So the way that we're structured, for those of you who aren't familiar with Elios, we are the Elios Foundation. We're a private foundation, a 501c3, and we have a wholly owned subsidiary called Elios Investments Management LLC, which is a for-profit subsidiary, and that manages our funds. These are series LLCs, and each series LLC, each fund has firewalled investment opportunities. So some of you may have been to some of our events where we featured Liberty and Justice, working in Liberia, manufacturing t-shirts and clothing. Some of you have seen some of the work that we're doing in Kenya with Sanergy, focusing on human waste as a fertilizer with clean toilets in the slums. HealthPoint was the first deal that we did in India, and then we'll be hopefully launching a fund in Latin America in the next few months, focusing on some entrepreneurs there. So that's kind of how we are structured at the Elios Foundation, and we see kind of this gap in this social entrepreneurship space. One of the things that we've been learning as we've developed and evolved is to see where the capital needs are in the space and how we can best use our opportunity as a foundation to have the biggest, most catalytic impact that we can. So we see that there's a number of incubators, a number of accelerators on the far right-hand side, a number of great ideas that are bubbling away, and then on the left-hand side is where the vast majority of investment capital is, waiting for $1 million minimum investment, which is safer, which is more secure, which they can hopefully be more confident in the returns. And we see this huge gap in the middle, which is stifling the growth of market-based solutions in the developing world. There's a lack of entrepreneur-friendly capital that's coming in, which is going to cripple and is hindering the growth of this entrepreneurship space. So the way that we do that with our model is we come in with our capital. We've used grants to come in early using our capital from the Elios Foundation as a grantor. We've also used our capital to come in with seed investment funding. And then when we feel comfortable with the entrepreneur, we're then able to do an A round, which we use the LLC structure, so for-profit dollars can invest through us into the different series that we have. And then we've done follow-on investments when there's been a need for more capital, and then a B round, and the idea is that we get to the point where we as early stage investor are able to have an exit, late stage investor are able to come in, the entrepreneur is able to have a long-term sustainable business, and we spend a lot of intellectual capital along with a relatively small amount of financial capital to help to get the entrepreneurs to be ready. So that's kind of how we view the space. So this is the Kenya Fund. Some of you came to the event that we did a couple of months ago at the beginning of the summer, and that focused on some of the opportunities in the Kenya Fund. So we currently have 5 deals that we've done in the Kenya Fund. On the far left is Penda Health, one health clinic where we've made some investment capital by ourselves. Copia, which is a catalogue, Sears catalogue model to get products and services into the peri-urban communities. Zana A, which is a sanitary pad manufacturing company, exploring the opportunities to manufacture sanitary pads so that girls can complete their high school education. And then DDD, which we'll be talking about shortly, and then Sanergy, which is focusing on the toilets in the slums of Kenya. So that's kind of how we work within our fund structure. That's kind of a brief overview. Again, apologies for those of you who have seen that previously. I think it'd be good at this stage for me just to read out one legal disclaimer that our lawyers have asked us to read out at every event, and then we'll watch a video and then Jeremy will talk. So I need to make clear at the beginning that the purpose of the program is to discuss and educate about impact investing generally, and that there will be no discussion on any offering, any ongoing offering, nor will any questions be taken or information provided about any such offering. So that's the legal disclaimer. With that, I'll see if I can set up the video, and then Jeremy will take over.
In 2011, Digital Divide Data, DDD, launched its first for-profit subsidiary in Kenya. DDD Kenya recruits motivated youth that are living in the slums of Nairobi and provides them with employment and university scholarships.
We are at Digital Divide Data Kenya, an enterprise that is organized to assist people from less privileged areas. My name is Imelda Amolo Millicent. I've stayed in DDD for 1 full year. DDD has changed my life a lot. If I start with my family at home. My brother is in school right now, in a boarding school that is, and the adopted brother is also doing his computer courses in Nairobi here, just because of DDD. And as an individual, DDD has taken me so far. It has moved me from the ground, and now I'm seeing that I'm being raised a bit. I have work experiences. I have a lot of knowledge in IT, and I've also joined KU, something that I never thought of. And I'm now first year, second semester, almost completing my second semester.
These young people spend half their day working to provide BPO services to clients globally, and the other half completing their higher education.
I'm taking Bachelor of Commerce, and I wanted to major in accounting. And I think that is the major job I wanted to do since I was young.
And what do you want to do when you graduate?
I want to be an accountant, a senior accountant in a certain organization like DDD, and I wish it will come to pass.
DDD alumni go on to high-skilled positions in which they earn more than 4 times the average regional wage.
I live in Mathare. I can explain Mathare as a poor place because people who are staying there are just people who are, you can tell just from the physical appearance that they are poor. We have a family of 8 people plus the adopted son. I work at DDD, and my father is also working as a tailor, but the rest are just at home. They have no work.
Mathare is a collection of slums in Nairobi with a population of approximately 500,000 people. Despite improvements in education and increasing urbanization, the slums of Nairobi are characterized by cycles of extreme poverty and high youth unemployment.
Welcome to my home. This is where we stay. And I stay with my mother, my brother, and my father. And this is where we can do the simple course during the day. And we have everything around. You can see the water cans. Yeah, and there is this one for fish. This is my mom.
And what is your name?
My name is Elizabeth Auma.
And how long have you lived here?
Almost 5 years.
And are you proud of your daughters working at DDD?
I'm very happy with the work of DDD.
And why?
I have get very many changes in my life.
What has changed?
Even my life I've got a change. Millicent can bring me anything. She buy for me anything without me to give her some money. I'm very happy with DDD.
The Kenyan BPO industry is expected to grow from 30 million in 2010 to 200 million in 2015. Over the next 3 years, DDD Kenya plans to provide employment and education to more than 500 disadvantaged youth in Nairobi. These 500 graduates will go on to become role models and leaders in their community and will arguably have a ripple effect that will greatly extend DDD's impact.
DDD has really made my life as a new thing.
It is very dramatic when we're there in Kenya and when you come to the office. I have a picture later showing office towers in Nairobi and the slums. And it's dramatic when you start off with interviews of people working in the offices and then go visiting their homes, you really see the gap. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really privileged to be here. I haven't come from quite so far, but I've come from New York to be here with everybody. We were up in San Francisco yesterday talking with some friends of Elios, and it's nice to be here among friends of the Elios Foundation. We've worked with different foundations and funders over time and have had great experiences overall, a few war stories to tell for it, and I can tell you that kind of working with Elios, particularly in this impact investing space, which is new for all of us on the kind of practitioner and funder side, has really been a privilege for us. And Elios really, in my experience, has really kind of put themselves on the shoes of the social entrepreneurs and figure out how we can really kind of make this work for us while kind of bridging the gap to investors and others and making this work for you as well. So it's really a privilege to be here together. Andy did say that he's wary that many social entrepreneurs, he puts them up in front of a group and they tell their own story for, don't stop for hours of their personal stories. But I did just want to start to kind of, as I was watching this, I reflected, how did I end up from Montreal, where I grew up, and New York now, and here with you and doing work in Kenya and Cambodia and Laos for 10 years before that. And I do think when I point back to it, I think I always had the sense as a young person grew up in Montreal that I wanted to do something that would make a difference to the community. I didn't really know kind of what form that would take. And when I think back on where that came from, I do think that one big influence is that my mother, miraculously, was born in a concentration camp 3 weeks before liberation in April 1945. She was born April 18th in Zittau, a small camp. She was conceived in the Lodz ghetto and survived the selection at Auschwitz in her mother's stomach. And then was born 3 weeks before liberation in a small camp in Zittau, which is extremely rare. There's just really a handful of people at most. Most pregnant women were killed or their babies were taken from them. And we didn't talk about that a lot growing up, but it certainly was something that was kind of in the background. And I think for my mother, who's very special, and the rest of us, I think we really have a sense that it's a miracle that we're here. It's a miracle that all of us are here, on this planet. And I think the question is, when you're here and you shouldn't have been here really, what do you do with that life and how do you spend your time? And I think that's what brings us all here, on an afternoon when you have a lot that you could be doing, but all of us a sense of, how do we spend our limited time and resources and energy. And so that's what started my path to ending up here today. I went off to college, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Senior year in college, I had this anxiety in my arms about how am I going to find work that's meaningful and challenging. I went off to not knowing what else to do. I went off, submitted my resume to career services at Harvard and ended up as a consultant at McKinsey, and did kind of traditional corporate consulting work, and loved a lot of what I was doing in terms of the problem solving, the teamwork and so on. But at the end of the day, didn't really care about as much of kind of making more money for AT&T or other companies. And so one thing led to another, and 10 years ago now, I found myself in Phnom Penh in Cambodia. I was visiting Angkor Wat. We have a few people here who have been to Angkor Wat, and beautiful temples, you should all go. And I talk often, there's an Israeli poet who died a few years ago, Yehuda Amichai, and he talks about tourists in the old city of Jerusalem, and he says, the tour guides, they normally say, you see that man next to him is this arch, goes back 5,000 years. But instead you should say, you see that arch, next to him is this man with groceries for his family, and this is what life is really like. And that's what really struck me when I was at Angkor, was just the people that I met. And just this real sense that English and computers were going to bring better futures to people, this kind of promise of globalization. And I went to visit a nonprofit that was training people with disabilities to make crafts. But in the back they were teaching some people computers. I said, oh, great, and there's this whole World Bank funding, and they had all the pictures of these graduates on the wall. And I said, oh, great, what kind of jobs do people have when they graduate? And they're like, oh, we don't have any jobs, it's Cambodia. So here you had, money from donors being wasted, okay, that's their fault. But then you had the hopes of people who were really being raised, this promise of, CNN, that you learn English, you learn computers, you're going to have better futures, and there weren't real opportunities there. Phnom Penh is quite different today. You should visit if you haven't in a long time. But But it just had this idea that there was this gap, that there are people sitting in rooms like you, pretty nice rooms, who really would want to help. And there's a way that we all have to figure out how to bridge that gap among us. We didn't have the language of the 1% and the bottom 1%, but really this endeavor has really been about how do we bring all of us together, those of us more fortunate, like me and those of you in this room and those who aren't, and how do we kind of be a bridge against that in this opportunity of globalization. And so I got some friends together, some childhood friends from Montreal, some McKinsey friends. We went back to Phnom Penh for a month in the summer of 2001. And we kind of got our motos and said, what could we do to help, and want to do something that would help. And long story short, we started Digital Divide Data just over 10 years ago now. We're in Cambodia for 10 years, and we opened in Kenya last year. Let me just turn the page when I end up here. This way, I think. And so our vision really is about how can we provide a permanent step out of poverty for people that you saw personified particularly in those slums. How can we really be a stepping stone out, and how do we do that? There's so many approaches that make a small difference, but how can we do something more intense that will really have a longer standing impact for people? And since people were learning computers, we had an interest in computers. The question was really how could we create jobs doing that? And for us, it's really become about how do we leverage what's now a huge, pick your recent study, there's a McKinsey study, $100 billion of IT outsourcing work in the world. 60% of it's done in a few cities in India. You add a few cities in China and Philippines, you get 80% of that work. And that's been great. That's been great for economic development. But the question is really how can more of that work go to poor countries and poor populations? And instead of relying on just philanthropic dollars, we now have a huge force of the market that really can be pulling people up, not only teaching them economic development, not only providing incomes to them, but really teaching them the skills you need to survive, problem-solving skills, teamwork skills. There's nothing like learning how to get work done that when you've got Reader's Digest, as we do as a client, waiting for their work on Monday, or it's not going to go on the website to really know that what work is, what it's really like at international standards it really takes for all of us to be able to compete in today's environment. And so our idea really was about how could we do something that would have a lasting impact? How could we do something that would leverage kind of the broader globalization and forces? And we developed this work-study program that was talked about, and I'll say another word about. But here, put together this page when we started in Kenya, which to me personifies what we're really trying to do. Kind of how do we get young people from there to here? And that's not actually DDD's building, but is a tall building in Cambodia. That's what really this is about. How do we help people have lasting impact and lasting change in their lives? Well, just before I get to that then, let me just tell you a little bit more about what we're doing then, as you heard. So what our program is that we recruit students graduating high school in Kenya, and particularly from 3 slums, Matari being one of them, in Cambodia and Laos from around the country, more rural areas. We provide some training in English and computers, depending on people's backgrounds. But the heart of what we do is we have a 4-year work-study program. People work 6 hours a day doing work for clients around the world. And we then give people scholarships and loans to go to university, to access education. She referred to KU, which is Kenyatta University, which is well respected, and she's now studying in. And so that's the work-study program. And then after 4 years, we've just been in Kenya a year, so we don't have graduates, but in Southeast Asia, where we have a track record, after 4 years, people graduate on either to higher skilled jobs within DDD, or the majority of them to jobs outside of DDD. Some in technology, some in other areas. But as I said, while people are learning technology, what they're really learning about is kind of how to get work done at high qualities in teams, and the kind of problem-solving skills that we all take for granted from our kind of educational systems that people don't have as much experience with. So that's the model of what we do. The business that we run, so we now run, this last year was almost $4 million, the year end of June 30th, on earned income of clients who paid us for real work that we sent to them. One of our board members, Howard, who lives up in Palo Alto, always says, it's not real until the client takes money from their bank account and sends it to your bank account. Then you've really succeeded. And so we have our first check still from the Harvard Crimson, the student newspaper. It was when we first started, they gave us a project typing in the student newspaper from 1873, 1899. You've probably never read the Harvard Crimson, but it basically from those years. But it involves a lot of crew races between Harvard and Yale, and so I like to say that the only socially redeeming thing that came from that, although I don't know, Jim maybe will disagree, but the only socially redeeming thing that came from that was that it created a job in Cambodia 140 years later. Trying to explain to people why this was so important. Who won the head of Charles that year? But so we started doing this, just typing in the Harvard Crimson, typing it in twice so that you'd have high quality. And our work has then evolved to what we call content BPO, which is a fancy word for kind of content conversion. We do a lot of newspapers. We're just in the midst of finishing up 8 million pages for the Dutch National Library, 4 million pages for the British Library, basically taking that content and making it searchable online. And I could talk about how we do that more, but making books for your iPad and Kindles, and they are magazines that you buy. So we worked in the early years a lot for universities and libraries. We work now more in the corporate world for publishers, content aggregators, that are doing kind of the neat content converted. Like Reader's Digest, in fact, what we do for them is they have 30 still plus magazines or more in every language every month. We get the electronic files from them, but to take it from the Photoshop InDesign files that are optimized for design to put it on the website and syndicate it, you need to take the text out, but you need to check all the tags that they're right, that a sidebar is really a sidebar or not indented, not part of the article. So there's a lot of that kind of content formatting that we do. So that's what we're up to. Let me talk about the impact, and then let me talk about Kenya and why we're doing that and what we're doing there. So we've graduated 500 employees in Cambodia. We now have 1,000 people in our 3 countries. Cambodia and Laos have about 800, and Kenya's up to almost 200 now. We've graduated 500 people. The graduates are earning, the average income in Cambodia is about $60 or so a month. Our employees are making about $125 to $150 with all their benefits, which is above kind of market for them. We think of those, though, as those are fine jobs. We think of them as living wage jobs. People can support themselves, food, kind of transport, school, start to have some money to help family members do some things. But if this was only about creating 1,000 outsourcing jobs, to me that wouldn't be as powerful. What's really powerful is it's a stepping stone. And we really measure our impact on what happens to people years later. And so the main way we do this is we look at people's incomes in the years after DDD. We do annual surveys from when they start. We measure social economic impact around their salaries, but also their kind of standard of livings. We measure their personal development. Fancy word the academics showed us around self-efficacy, but really about how does your confidence change? How does your sense of possibilities for the future, and just you see it on people's faces when they come in and when they leave 4 years later, but really, do you feel like you can control your future? Do you feel like you can have a dream that's realizable? And you just see that real transformation in people. Our graduates this year in the survey that just came through in Asia have an average salary of over $300 a month. So these are young people who probably would be earning something like $60, maybe $80 in a low-skilled kind of job, who are earning $300 plus. And so we estimate this on the conservative side at about $60,000 per person in lifetime earnings increase, which is a significant amount of funds for there. We're only 8 years out, so you can't predict what's going to happen in the next 10, 15 years, but if anything, we've been conservative about it, and you'd expect that the returns to kind of human capital improvement will be even greater in their future, in their careers. And this is just a kind of fancy graph of saying this. The kind of expected earnings is basically looking at high school graduates who didn't go to university, who are in lower skilled jobs. What are they earning today? And we have survey data on that from the government. And then what are our graduates doing? It's a little bit stylized, but up over $3,000 a year, $3,600 going to $4,000 kind of on average, and looking at what that delta is. So that's what we're up to. That's why we think it's having a difference. It certainly isn't a program that's about how do you touch millions of people. Sure, you could say 1,000 people and they have 7 family members or 8 family members. You start to get to 10,000. You start to get to some serious kind of numbers. But this isn't a program about having a small impact on millions. It's about how do you have a deeper impact that really will have a kind of generational impact for the generations that are coming afterwards. So Kenya, we're in Cambodia and Laos. It kind of started because the Rockefeller Foundation approached us and said that as a kind of next step to impact investing, which is kind of one area they've helped kind of catalyze. They were interested in this area of what we were doing, and nicely kind of thought of us as some of the pioneers in this area of what we're calling impact sourcing, which is about how do you have social impact of outsourcing work, basically. And so they said to us, hey, could we try what you're doing in Africa? And for a couple of years we said, we're kind of busy, we're staying focused, we've got to kind of stick with what we're doing. But as we went through a plan 2.5 years ago, thinking about under what conditions we really would want to expand the work we're doing, we came to 2 things. One is if we have a population of employees who would have different skills than we currently have in Cambodia and Laos. And number 2, and I'll talk about that in a second, number 2 is whether there's a local economy that we could sell work to. Because 80-90% of our work is from US and Europe, which is great. But if all we're doing is opening new locations, you're kind of taking that work and doing it in other places. But if you have skills that you wouldn't work you wouldn't be able to do. And two, if you have work from the local office towers, which you don't have in Phnom Penh, although they're getting up there, then you have a model that could replicate in many more places. There's a lot of places that look like that page of towers in Brazil and in South Africa and other places that you can imagine. And so Kenya for us really fit on both those criteria. One is that those young people living in Mathare that you saw there, they have access to good education actually, and the language of instruction is English. Since elementary school. And so people's English is not fluent native, but it's very strong as you saw in there. And so we're able to do work we couldn't do before in Cambodia and Laos. And so we're doing a lot of work now for Ancestry.com. If any of you are into genealogy, they send us endless birth records and death records of the 1800s. I can barely decipher them, but with some extra skill and work, our team's able to do that quite well. So we're doing a lot of work for them. And so we've led to a lot of kind of work that relates to kind of English, and also just more problem solving of kind of keeping databases of data updated. We're doing managing people's AdWords campaigns for clients, and so work that we couldn't have been doing in our offices before. And then second, on the local work, it's been a bit slow going at the beginning, but there's kind of a real corporate sector there that's interested. There's lots of banks and credit unions who have to digitize their records, who have paper stacked everywhere. There's a government mandate in the next year they have to be automated systems. It's taken time to kind of get them on board. You know, their competitor is just their cousin who tried it and kind of gave up and fled. So they're going to come along as customers. What has been successful in the shorter term over this last year is that we've been selling a lot of market research work. In Cambodia and Laos, we type in a lot of surveys. So UNICEF goes out and surveys kind of children's deaths in Cambodia, and we get stacks of paper and we type them all in. In Kenya, we have the mandate now of going out and collecting the data with our employees, keying it in, and also then doing the analysis. And so we've been hiring people with higher level master's and PhD skills to do some of that. So it's kind of part of how do we advance the kind of skills that we're doing in the local marketplace that give opportunities to our young people, and also give them opportunities to continue to grow while being kind of profitable for what we're doing. So that's why we've ended up in Kenya. We've been open just over a year and 3-4 months. We have a fearless leader, Amalo, who hopefully you all meet at one time. The gang here certainly preferred that she come instead of I, but my main job is to kind of protect her time and keep her over there. So I had to come and be here with you today. But Amalo grew up in Kenya, was an undergraduate at Harvard a few years before me, started the first internet provider in Africa in the mid-90s, Africa Online, which is now the biggest in the continent. And she was at the Gates Foundation most recently. So Amalo's a real star, and she's really led the team there. What's happened over the last year has been interesting for all of us. One is that we've been able to do a lot more work that we didn't expect, that in the past we had to turn down. Number two is we've really been able to develop a strong management team. Everyone that reports to Amalo is Kenyan. In Cambodia and Laos, there's not a strong educational or kind of or business sector, so it's really hard to hire. We have 100 managers in Asia who all came up as operators, who walked in the door 8 years ago, who are very inspiring people and really kind of keep the spirit of the place, but don't have the experience of how do you run a $10 million organization where $4 million of earned revenue and looking to get to 10 in the next few years, and so you don't have that kind of bench strength of doing that. In Kenya, you do really have managers who have that experience. And so it's been very exciting to see that. Amalo's the one, I'm not the Africa expert myself. Amalo can talk much more about it, but there was a lot of warnings we got before that it'd be really hard to find managers, it'd be hard to find talent kind of in Africa. And our experience has been that, Amalo's had to fire a lot of people kind of in the beginning, but that if she just turns through people pretty quickly, she's been able to put together a really talented team. Her first IT manager, who she's excited about, after a week, she's like, well, he didn't show up half the days, and he came 2 hours, and turned out he still had his last job and wasn't leaving it to see how this job was. So he is not around anymore. But we have a really talented team that's been there, which is exciting, and it's been going really well. We're doing about last month we did $60,000 worth of work, so on a run rate about $700,000 kind of for the year. Our first year we did something like $500,000 of kind of a real work to clients, which is kind of fast out the gate for a startup doing that, and it's been working well. So that's what we're up to in Kenya. Let me just talk about kind of the structure of the organization. We're a US 501c3 nonprofit, and then in each of the countries we're structured in the way that has been best for those countries. In Cambodia we're set up as a nonprofit, as an international NGO, part of the 501c3, and in Laos the communists don't like nonprofits. Go figure, they like businesses better. They're worried the nonprofits are going to overthrow the government. So we're set up as a business in Laos. And in Kenya, AMLO felt strongly that we'd be more successful as a business there, both because clients wouldn't want to hire nonprofits, thinking that based on their experience they don't really produce high quality work. You have that issue here a bit in the U.S., but not to not the same extent. And also that staff wouldn't want to come to work for a nonprofit. They're thought of kind of as stodgy and not really kind of delivering quality. So we set up as a for-profit. AMLO has 10% of the ownership, which vests over 4 years. So it's kind of a management team that has some profit sharing and benefit from really succeeding there. And that's how we're set up there. We have an LLC in the U.S. that owns those for-profits, just to own our ownership share that's fully owned by the 501c3. And that's how we're set up. In general, our earned income has covered our operating expenses. So we basically break even on our sales costs, and the U.S. is included in that, and all the Asia operating costs. We break even on that. And then we've been using philanthropic donations for the scholarships and the recruitment and training of the young people. And our goal, and we're already seeing to happen in Asia, is that as we're making more money, we can cover those costs as well through the profits from the business. So that's what we're up to. This kind of working with Elios has been one of our first attempts to use some debt for the future growth of the organization. And so we've had a line of credit in the past. Our friends at Nonprofit Finance Fund and RSF, which some of you know and have been good partners to us, against our receivables. Once you have $3.8 million of revenue last year, people paying you well, you end up with 45 days of receivables. It's $600,000, and they've helped finance that for us. So we don't use it that often, but when we need to, we can draw against the receivables. But this is the first case where we've been experimenting with saying, how can we use some debt to help the growth of Kenya? We started off with a grant from Rockefeller. How can we add some debt if we can make this work? And we're still on track over the next year to be profitable in covering our costs fully through the earned revenue in Kenya. Then how can we do this in other places like Kenya? Particularly if we can find places that have other skills and also that have a local market. So that's what we're up to there. The end goal, as I was talking about, is generating profits from what we're doing, making this scalable and replicable. So do you have any questions for me, that kind of things I didn't touch that you want to open the door?
Yeah, why don't we open the door up for other questions? If anyone wants to have any questions, if not, I'll ask away. So, any questions?
I have one here. You mentioned 45 days credit.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that with local customers in Kenya.
Paying us, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's one issue. Actually, in fact, one of the areas that will be potential big work is from the government. And people say it could take us months to collect. Yeah. So and actually, one of the issues, and this is a market issue, some of you could solve there. I don't know, do you have experience in Kenya at all? No. Is that it is very hard to get credit in Kenya itself, right? So one of our advantages being a U.S. organization is that we leverage 6% rates from Nonprofit Finance Fund or RSF. Whenever a Kenyan company went to finance even their receivables, even international receivables from IBM, they'd be paying 18% or something like that. So we haven't faced the issue so much because our local work to date has been mostly market research work, and the clients have been the World Bank, Financial Diaries, which are big organizations there, and haven't been prompted to pay. But that will be an issue as it becomes larger and the local client base is more significant. Yeah.
What possible challenges have you found in involving women, and what are your percentages of male and female involvement?
Yeah, thanks. We work very hard that it's 50% men and women that are in the program. And in both the locations, it's taken extra work, and it's been a bit harder. In particular, we're focusing on students graduating high school. In both places, there's a lower percentage relatively to that. So it has taken, me in particular, who thinks it's important, kind of the board saying, an easier path is just to hire people that are there that know we have to do this. And so there have been some challenges. We work in Cambodia with a French NGO that does the recruitment for us. Goes around the country, gives presentations to high schools. Then we have logic tests. I didn't talk about that, the recruitment process much, but we have logic tests that try to kind of find the smartest people. How do you measure that exactly? Motivational interviews for people to see if they're motivated to help themselves, help their country and community, and then social investigations, where we visit people's homes to make sure they really do come from poor families. And our target is really to find people who wouldn't have come to university if not for that. And so it's hard to predict exactly, but if you've got 7 older siblings and none went to university, it's most likely you're not going to. But in Cambodia, we were 50-50 for a long time when we were doing kind of on our own. We started working with this NGO, and all of a sudden, started shifting 75%, young men. And why? And they're like, well, look at the test, the girls are all doing less than that. I'm like, okay, well, lower the standard by 3 points and see if people can still do the job, And all of a sudden, lo and behold, it doesn't matter if you get, 96 or 93 on this random IQ test on whether you can then do the work. I mean, there's a difference if you're 40 or you're 90. So it's taking extra work there. In Kenya this year, at first we had trouble. What we did in Kenya is we worked with a network of NGOs that work in the slums, and we asked them to kind of send people to us who they worked with over time, so they could have a track record of knowing they're motivated, they helped them through high school, and we ended up with less young women than young men, but we just redoubled our efforts, and we reached out to more NGOs that were working particularly with women. We're still at small numbers, we have 200 people in this movie, you can't find any young women in the slums who have great potential. So that's what we've been doing, and it's something we have to keep our eye on, but with enough effort, it's been successful.
I'm curious on the other side of the cycle of job
Yeah.
placement.
Yeah.
Are you working hard to recruit from within and build up management from those that you've trained, or are you working with at all to push them outward to stay within their community or stay
Right.
within Kenya? I'm just curious about the job placement because it's such
Yeah.
an interesting cycle that you're creating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, right, in one way you say, well, look, there weren't that many jobs when we started in Cambodia, and now you've trained 500 people, why are there jobs for them? What we found is interesting is that it's taken us less work than we needed to help people get jobs. First of all, we tried to clarify the program. First, it wasn't clear, like, should you leave, should you not leave, and so on. So we've been very clear that the heart of the social program is the 4-year work-study program. We now call it Data Management Operators. DMOs is the kind of heart of the program. That's really about where our social impact is focused on. After the 4 years, our management team, we try to fill as much as possible with people that have grown up in the organization. We started, first 3-4 years was only people who were really grown up in the organization. We started hiring people from the outside. We've been clear that the goal of the management is not, it's great if we can develop people further, but the goal is to have a strong management so you can keep a lot of people employed and you can have a strong business. So that if it's kind of a question between keeping someone employed who's not as strong just because they're from a poor background, that we don't do that in the management team as much as they used to. So we do try to promote people, but on the management side, we decide that's really about having local management as much as possible and having strong management. On the graduating side, what's been interesting, I thought it would take a lot of work to help place people in jobs. And we do some of that. We help with the resumes. We have kind of career counseling as they're going through this. What color is your parachute? We got the free license to that to kind of translate that into Khmer and Malaysia. So we use that kind of throughout with our employees. But what's happened is that our employees haven't had trouble getting jobs, and really have gone from this kind of large pool of millions of unskilled laborers to a much smaller pool, even among college-educated students. I was just reading, we're doing a recent review of our educational programs and what kind of, how we manage that in Cambodia in particular. And just 2003, there were preparing 40,000 university students, and 40,000, and now there's 200,000 going to university. So numbers have really grown, the quality hasn't really grown, so you've got a lot of people unemployed, and so even among that group, what we've seen is that the skills of our employees around what I was talking about, problem solving, teamwork, technology, kind of knowing how to show up on time, has really been valuable and led people to be hired pretty easily. And so employers come back and hire other employees. So that hasn't been as much of an issue. We'll have to see in Kenya, we're early in this, and so it seems there's a few years till that happens. We are interested in, part of our business challenge is how do you continue to grow the skills of the work you do, the margins, the dollar per hour that you can collect. And so we're trying to do more advanced kind of work, and over time, hopefully that'll create more opportunities for you to stay with us for longer time. Yes?
Does the DDD business model give you a competitive advantage in seeking out clients? And then how are you competitive with other offerers in the service?
Yeah, it's interesting. Kind of my thoughts have changed about a little bit over time. So, now we have 1,000 people, $4 million in revenue. We're kind of bigger than a lot of kind of small little data entry places there. We look at our competitors as these content BPO firms that are like $10 to $100 million. People we haven't heard of, like Innodata, Aptara, SBI. Their competitors are the Infosys and Accentures and Tatas that do kind of higher IT outsourcing work. So our cost structure is lower than theirs. Than they have. So there's some competitive advantage from that. Although the real challenge for the next stage is how do you have the same quality procedures that you have at those larger places doing the infrastructure that you have. So the way I think about it these days is I think that our social mission gets us in the door a lot of places that we wouldn't have otherwise. So Tom Friedman wrote, and there's a nice piece of us, there's a little mini chapter about us in the world is flat, so some CEOs see that and they say, oh, let's talk to these guys, and we wouldn't normally talk to a small place like this. And so it gets us in the door of those kind of places. And that's kind of our competitive advantage.
And then at the end of the day, it's really about price and quality, and how do you then, deliver, and keep them confident, do that and deliver on it. So I'd say that's kind of where the key differentiators been. And then it's just this challenge for us of how do we continue to build the infrastructure, and quality processes, and quality teams, and so on that it takes to compete with those larger organizations. One of our kind of big focuses now, something people can help with here, is what the key factor for our growth. There's a number of them, but one of them is enough work. Continue to grow that piece. I never thought when this started 10 years ago, I was just talking to my friends. Where can we find some work? I wouldn't thought we'd sell $4 million in work in 1 year. But when we talk getting 10, 20, and $1 million and more, we need more recurring kinds of revenue that are ongoing work. And I think we need to shift to more corporate kinds of work. So more traditional outsourcing stuff in insurance, in healthcare, in banks, and those kinds of areas. And so to the extent that people have kind of relationships or ideas around that, we don't have as much of a track record of doing that kind of work, but we've got the same skill set that you need. So I recently a senior executive who has some vision around what we're doing here and the impact of this. Who says, hey, look, this is the kind of work I have as analysts, insurance claim forms or health claim forms and so on. That gives us kind of an opportunity to kind of learn that and deliver some of that. To the extent that people here have ideas around that, would be interested. And we're working on a number of different fronts for kind of our ongoing work to business development. One is this content BPO work that we're doing, and we have salespeople working on that, a couple here in the US. But then also we're trying some new things. So one is trying to look at some other new corporate sectors that we could do outsourcing work. Another is looking to the bigger outsourcing firms and trying to subcontract work from them, which takes time, but is getting a little traction. We're also starting to work on an additional direction, which is really about how can the data itself that we're digitizing have social value? And how can we do that in a model that generates revenue? So in particular, in Africa, in Kenya and Nigeria, we're looking at 2 projects. We hope to start them soon. Where in Kenya, we're looking at police accident records for traffic accidents, and in Nigeria, corporate registration records. So in Nigeria, in Nairobi, if you've been there, there are a lot of traffic accidents. You probably believe any number I told you. Apparently it's 9,000 a month. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a day. But and if you're an insurance company, you then have to get the insurance, the reports. So you have to go to the police. They send people to the police departments. You have to get them. You have to know where they are. And so what we're looking at is going every day to the police station. We're working with the police department for us to scan them and index them, and then sell subscriptions to the insurance companies to get a push file every day of everyone who listed that they were insured with that insurance company. And so the government would have to pay for that. We then share the revenue with the police department. And so that's one thing we're looking at. In Nigeria, we're looking at a program where this corporate records are registered. If you want to look up a name or file a form or look up an annual report for a company, you have to find someone in this town in Nigeria to go do that. And we're working with an impact investing kind of foundation there that's interested in putting out the $500,000 it would cost for us to scan and index the data. And then we would sell access to law firms and companies and share the revenue with the government. And so we're interested in that as a way that would have impact itself in terms of kind of making government more successful in Africa, and also be a way of generating revenue for us. So a number of kind of fronts and a number of directions of business. Yes?
I wonder what kind of dropout rate you have with your students, and is there a common reason?
So I don't know the exact number, but from when people are hired to the 4 years is very, very low. It's like 1, 2, 3%. It's very small actually. So there's a lot of work that goes into the upfront recruiting, and we really haven't had people that have dropped out. There are a few kind of addiction issues kind of early on among some people, a few kind of particular family situations that were troublesome. But no overall kind of themes that we've seen. The numbers have been quite small on that front. Questions here? Thoughts?
Any other questions? Now is your chance to ask away. Oh, well, thank you, Jeremy. Like I said at the beginning, I was really touched when I had the opportunity to go and visit the workers that were working in the office, all suited and booted, ready to go, high energy, really engaged in the opportunity they had, and to be able to go back and see their family was mind-blowing, to be able to see the difference that they made, and they were truly rock stars in the slums. It was an honour to walk alongside them. They're the inspiration for the community. They were really respected within the community. And you saw us on the video, Elizabeth, Alpha's mother, and saw how excited she was and how proud of her daughter. So we're really excited to be partnering with DDD. We're really proud of the work they've been doing, and thank you, Jeremy, for coming down and sharing that with us. And like I said at the beginning, this is the first of 4 events that we're doing this fall. The next event's going to be at the beginning of October, and that's going to be featuring Sanergy, which is the toilets in the slums of Nairobi. And we're going to have one of the co-founders, David Auerbach, come down for that. So if you've not given us your email, or you've not had an email from Elios, then please make sure that you do send that on to us. And we'll be sending around invitations and again a video and hopefully some radio interviews as well. So thank you all for coming. There's some refreshments at the back. Do spend some time mixing and mingling, and hopefully see you again soon. Thank you.